Thank you, Pierre. It was said in Pierre's earlier introduction that I'm a specialist in solar energy. And interestingly enough, not a single solar collector or mention of solar energy after this in this entire talk. So there you go. Can I ask you, by way of a little bit of exercise, could I ask all of you to look to your left? So you've got to do as I say. I'm not going to ask the next question. Now look to your right. Now this didn't work for you at the end of the lines up there and at the end of the tables. But my point is, on either side of you, and this may seem surprising, are the people who are going to determine the future. And they can determine whether it's environmentally sustainable or not. And higher education is that kind of system. I could ask you to look down, look up. It's about the interactions between people. It's about people rather than about the institution. And people are varied. People vary in their commitment, however they adopt things, their commitment to things, whether they're early adopters, the leaders, whether they go with the mainstream, whether frankly they can't be bothered. Now, we've probably not got any of the latter category in this room in terms of sustainability, you're self-electing to be here, but in moving things forward, things are never quite that as simple as it might appear, never black and white, never like a Hollywood movie. The late Rayner Banham wrote a very interesting book. He was a critic of architecture and urban design, and he wrote a book called The Sphere and the Labyrinth. And what he was contrasting was the purity of the sphere. We would maybe like things to be like shiny spheres, but in reality, they were complex labyrinths in which we had great difficulty navigating. Life is like that, the world is like that. And so my little title for this very short talk is really signposts in that labyrinth and how actually they are in higher education. What takes things forward? I'm going to use later on some examples from DIT, of which I have the honor to be president of, but I should say I'm not putting myself forward, nor indeed DIT, as any kind of paradigm or any kind of exemplar, but just as an illustration of what perhaps can be done and perhaps why some things happen. But I give you all the health warnings. I'm not in any way selling an institution, which I know many people in the audience today have either studied in, have relatives study in, or graduated from, or currently studying in, as any kind of exemplar of perfection. The little bit sort of stepping back a little bit about what higher education actually is about in this space. Fundamentally, what higher education does is take research, knowledge, creating it, documenting it, transferring it to a next generation, with a view to them producing items of tools, information that produce outcomes. And I would make the distinction there between tools and outcomes, and it's quite important in sustainability debate. In this room, for example, an outcome is the lights that we see at the top here. We want light. The tool to do it are those lights powered by a power station somewhere. But in reality, do we know whether that power station is using wind, oil, coal, what? No, the outcome is light. And there's a variety of ways of doing it, and the method we choose to do it comes out of a whole set of things to do with our knowledge, research capability, products that are available, economic viability, etc. Higher education seeks, particularly institutions like DIT, which would be more practice-led, research-informed, but certainly coming from a point of practice, would be about trying to synthesize knowledge and research towards those kind of outcomes for practical benefit. And the nature of what knowledge is often determined by processes in education. We define ourselves, perhaps in terms of being a sociologist or an engineer or whatever, by artificial divisions of disciplines, and they are simply because that's how knowledge has been defined. It is totally arbitrary. And that's some lessons for the future in that. In terms of environmental sustainability in higher education, and this is, in interest of time, a grossly simplified diagram, and I think is open to some critiques that I could do at great length. There are maybe three things that affect an institution. The processes within it, the champions, the initiatives, the celebrations, what is recognized, what is not recognized. External drivers. My own institution has recently signed a pact to reduce its energy consumption by 30% by 2020. Very challenging target. But it's an external thing that's out there that we have to live by. It can be determined by international partnership, and I'll talk about some of those later on. It's most often determined, and my little exercise is going to look left and look right, by culture, by empowerment, by the ability to foster initiative, and by the willingness of sufficient colleagues in higher education institution to feel empowered and to feel able to take that initiative. And that comes down, as has been said, to ethics, values, and to the ability to work across those artificial divisions between disciplines. They are just artificial. They are just a human construct. And sustainability doesn't sit neatly with engineering, science, or economics, or sociology. It is all those things. And studied from any one of those perspectives is going to arrive at a suboptimal solution. And only arriving at optimal solutions involves all those perspectives coming together. It involves people coming together. The big one that actually, in reality, drives a lot of things is, of course, external drivers. Regulatory compliance, building regulations, laws, etc. Organizational responsibilities, whether they're enshrined in regulatory context or in a more organizational-driven sense of corporate social responsibility, and in resource constraints. I mean, one of the issues in terms of moving away from fossil fuels in the past was views of their depletion. Or views that they were security of supply because the major resources were held in certain parts of the world where perhaps one wouldn't always get those supplies from. So external drivers are actually what spurs things on. But things don't happen unless the processes and culture are also there as well. Just take those external drivers a little bit further, just to illustrate how this breaks down. You could do it for every single one of those aspects there. But you take those regulatory compliance, resource constraints, organizational responsibilities. The responsibilities are essentially social. The resource constraints boil down to economics, particularly if your economics include the externalities of CO2 emissions, hospitalizations from road accidents, all these kind of things that are consequence of certain ways of behaving unsustainably. And the regulatory compliance comes down to environmental. And the balances that you do in an organization is that the environmental and the social leads to tolerable outcomes. And going back to my thing, it's a consensus, essentially a political consensus with a small p as to what constitutes tolerable. The social and the economic come down to what is seen as equitable, and that requires things around transparency in society, and certainly transparency within a particular organization. And the economic and the environmental come down to what is viable, but only viable in the context of the full set of external externalities. And those things combine to define what really is sustainable. It is a complex, mediated process, mediated between people. Okay. For those of you who don't know DIT, and I know there are some people who are not from Ireland, not from Dublin, we're big. There's some 20,000 students in DIT. We're spread across some 38 buildings across the city at present, and some of the locations are given there. And indeed, further than that, we've got locations to the north of here, which surprises people, in the airport. We've locations in the docks. In fact, you can't actually move around Dublin without going by one of our buildings. We're older than people think. We're nearly 130 years old. And we cover just about everything except sort of classical education and history, things like that, clinical medicine, veterinary medicine. We don't do those, but we do just about everything else. And we do it from programs prior to undergraduate degrees right the way through to PhD, and we're actually quite a significant research player. So we're a large higher education institution. If for the business people here, we've got about 2,000 people employed in the organization as a full-time equivalent. There are actually about 3,000 on our books in total, so we're a big employer. And if you wanted to think of us as a business, we turn over about 200 million euro a year. So even in business terms, we're quite significant. So what about sustainability in the DIT context? Well, for a start, it actually exists as one of our goals. Interestingly enough, some colleagues will quote this back to me as a goal we need to achieve more strongly. Other colleagues will say, oh, do we have a goal in sustainability? So there's initially an issue of communication and things that is there. But this is actually from our website. And this page, by the way, is updated. So if you're interested in what we do now, do go on the website and have a look. But it goes through what we provide as courses, what we do in research, our engagement with the communities around us, and in our actual operations. And I mentioned that we're not an exemplar or paradigm, and you see at the bottom there that we're ranked 74th in the world rankings for being a green institution. So hey, there are 74 people who probably do it better, if you believe these kind of rankings. And also just on this page, and it's actually on all the others there, you'll see in the blue box on the on your left, at the top there, things like, for example, journals on sustainable development highlighted there, a new master's highlighted on sustainability, technology, innovation, and that program is a program where students spend a third of the year in Spain, a third of the year here, and a third of the year in Purdue University in the US in Indiana, learning about those issues in those different contexts, and again, driven by the international opportunity. And so that's one kind of opportunity, right the way through to a digital certificate there, which is a program for those who've become unemployed in how to do energy analysis in buildings and make buildings more energy efficient. So little things just highlighted there which show the diversity of the activity. This, and I'm not sure you can see it at the back, but I'd be, you look at the website for the detail of it, is just some illustrations of programs, full-time undergraduate programs, part-time undergraduate programs, and full-time postgraduate programs. And the point in showing is not just that we have programs that are either focused on sustainable development. We have an MSc in sustainable development, which I know a number of you have been involved with, issues to do with sustainable electricity production, right through. But even on this, you will find, for example, a BSc in forensic and environmental science, a BSc ordinary degree in science. And the reason I put there is because an important part of this is that it's not exceptionalized. It's not put in a thing and only a few people do it, but that the curriculum of sustainable development, the understanding of those issues, becomes mainstream in the curriculum of all subjects, so that you've got the specialist, but also it's part of the ethos, it's part of the thinking in the general delivery of courses. To do that does rely on that feeling that colleagues buy into that agenda, okay? And in an academic institution, one has the academic freedom that people can dissent, one can have different views, and that's legitimate and appropriate. So there's an issue there, and that people feel genuinely empowered to change programs as they wish and to develop new programs. And from my perspective of institutional leadership, it's encouraging that it's actually happening. And it doesn't necessarily have to. And I do know institutions that have spent a lot of time trying to encourage colleagues to do it with very little actual traction. The other side of it is research, and going back to that transfer of knowledge, but actually creating new knowledge. And we have very strong activity, particularly around the energy area and aspects of urban sustainability. And you've heard my colleague earlier on talk about issues around cycling and things, and there's a very strong MSc in sustainable development focusing on sustainable urban development that has been long-standing in DIT. But if I can pick on a couple of things that are on there which are quite interesting, one of them is research on low-noise vehicles. And at first you might think, what has that got to do with sustainability? But it's interesting that to have certain things happen, you need underpinning enabling technologies. And a theme today has been that city centres need to perhaps become more dense so that you're reducing travel time, that travel can be more by pedestrians, by cycles, etc. So you have more people living in city centres. We've also heard that a more attractive shopping environment, and indeed perhaps even a more attractive shopping environment for the shopkeepers, is a pedestrianised environment. So you've got two things there, pedestrianised city centres, more people living in the city centre. A consequence of all that lot is deliveries to those shops take place at night. Actually, they take place very early in the morning and very late in the day, when all those people in all those city centre dwellings want to try and get some sleep. So for that strategy to work, you need delivery vehicles that have low noise. And it's not just making them electric, that is actually one of the solutions, but it's how they're loaded, unloaded, the trolleys that come out of them, etc., etc. So you think these things through, you need to get a very detailed analysis of what actually needed to truly do these solutions. It is a complex labyrinth indeed. The other thing is actually linking this into community. Successful higher education institutions engage with their community. They understand they're part of it for a whole variety of reasons to do with that's where students come from. It's also been shown to be valued, to be relevant, etc. And I'd pick up just two examples that are on here that do that. Through our Community Links program, we have an initiative called Students Learning with Communities, where groups of students in group project work, mainstream group project work that's going to lead to assessment and marks, will work on a project in their community. And most of them are actually concerned with the sustainable development of local communities. Issues to do with transport, noise, water quality, urban gardens, etc., wasteland, etc. They are dealing with the complexity, though, because they're actually dealing live with that community group. And if you deal with community groups, their objectives change, the goals change, the personalities change, and the outcomes are changing live with the project. That is what real life is like. And one of the beauties of those kind of projects is not only the students solving the particular problem, but they're also getting an insight as to what real problem solving when they graduate is actually like. The other initiative there, and it's been mentioned a number of times by colleagues from DCU and indeed by Dublin Airports Authority, is Ansley Glass, the Greenway, which is an initiative that we're very pleased to be partnering with DCU, the local authorities, the airport, and Ballymun Regeneration Limited to create a green economic corridor, essentially from Grange Gorman, which I'll talk about in a moment, all the way through to the airport and beyond, as a focus of clustering in a portish idea of clustering, different kinds of industries that have a common focus around clean technologies, energy efficient technologies, waste treatment technologies, etc., and then create a very strong industrial hive there. It also links very firmly with the idea of an airport as an international hub and linking with such initiatives elsewhere in the world. And again, a very commercial focus. So we've got that community focus and the commercial focus in relation to our external links. And the final thing is in our operations. We've taken a lot of measures. We, as I mentioned, we have 38 buildings around the city. They have an interesting history. In the car park in Bolton Street, as some of you may know, there's a building that was once a licorice factory. We have a music school that was once a fire station. So they weren't all quite built for purpose. And trying to run those in an energy efficient manner, in a manner that is in any way sustainable, has proved major challenges, and we've rose to that challenge. We also have, within the context of what we do now, a sustainable transport strategy and a whole range of initiatives for example, refurbishing discarded bikes and rendering them useful. Then people can take them out, hire them for free and all that kind of stuff. So trying to do other things. But one of the most important things is at the bottom there, and I will not discuss it in great detail because it would take several hours, which you don't have, is the relocation of the entirety of DIT to a new site. And the site at Grange Gorman, which for those not familiar with Dublin is to the south of here, between Smithfield and the North Circular Road, is 73 acres in the city centre. And it is going to be designed with sustainable development, is designed. We have a master plan, we have plan permission, we're actually building it now, with sustainable development principles underpinning it. The site itself has all the buildings facing south, open plan layouts, natural ventilation, daylight, cogeneration on site, reuse of existing buildings, surrounded by quality bus corridors, a cycle route that goes down from the Royal Canal to the Blessing Basin across the site and across to Phoenix Park. The Lewis, which will go from St Stephen's Green up O'Connell Street, will serve it and then go on to serve the Maynooth Railway line. So it has Lewis connections, cycles, bus routes around it. Actually has 2 bus stations adjacent to it as well. So in terms of those kind of aspects, very much sustainable in its physical sense. But more importantly, we're bringing together all those different parts of DIT in the 38 locations with a view to breaking down those disciplinary barriers. And as I've said, fundamentally, the key to successful education in sustainable development is that those disciplinary barriers begin to vanish and cross-cutting activity begins to dominate. And the new campus will hopefully enable us to achieve that. So to conclude, I've talked very briskly, I know, about a number of initiatives, and it's a bit like skimming over the top of mountaintops in terms of trying to go into any depth of them, where we're seeking environmentally sustainable activities, not just within the institution but outside. But as I would stress, the key thing in all those activities is not actually the bricks and mortar, it's not actually the institutional name, it is the people and how well they work together across disciplines. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.